The bewitching hour of 7:23 has arrived. That is 8 minutes after what we voted the other night. So I'm going to ask Precinct Chairman to take a count. I'll give you, there's some people coming in to take their seats. Precinct 1, 9. Precinct 1 has 9. Precinct 2, 13. Precinct 2 has 13. Precinct 3, 12. Precinct 3 is 12. Precinct 4, 10. Precinct 4 is 10. Precinct 5, 12. Precinct 5 is 12. Precinct 6, 10. Precinct 6 has 10. Precinct 7, 7. Precinct 7 has 7. Precinct 8, 9. Precinct 8 is 9. Well, there is a quorum. The quorum is 78. We have 82 people present. Please stand and join me in pledging allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was 7:23. It took me a minute. Very quickly, there should be, you have 2 pieces of paper that were issued, one green, one orange. Variation of it is called carrot. And those are the only things that have been handed out tonight. There is some material that was relevant to this session that was issued prior town meeting. That was for Article 28A. And for Article 76, the flood hazard maps were issued at the last session. It was rather interesting. We made that motion the other night to start at 7:15. The only trouble is we didn't have any means of providing to contact those people who were absent to tell them. Somehow they'll learn. Just quickly summarize so we know where we're at. Our 4th session, we covered Articles 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, Article 15, Article 23, and Article 33. Articles that were scheduled for this session are on that sheet and up on the overhead projector.
Speak closer to the microphone, Mr. Moderator.
It's interesting. If I was saying the wrong things, everybody would hear it. At this stage, we are ready to take Article 48, and I will recognize the, whoever's in charge of that one. Could be the Finance Committee Chairman. You did have a motion on that, and a recommendation. Mr. Hill. This is Article 48.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and members of town meeting.
Oh, the easement, I had,
The motion on Article 48, to see if the town will vote to transfer from the
Wait
EA...
a minute.
Sorry.
You're not reading the article. So you drop those things to see if, and you take away those, take any other action relative thereto. That is the action. So to make a motion out of an article, you eliminate, we're now doing that to seeing. So start, it says simply to transfer from whatever.
This is not a money article.
No, but what I have to remind you, even though this is not a money article,
why is this?
the law requires us record this because it requires a two-thirds vote under Chapter 40, subsection 14, easements, regardless of whether they're for $1 or anything else, they have to be recorded, if not unanimous.
So, Mr. Moderator, where should I begin if not at the beginning of the motion? Oh, that was a real question.
Very simple. To transfer from. That's what I have here in my records. Unless there's another...
I am at the top of page 73, to see if the town will vote to transfer.
I'm going to give some lessons.
To transfer.
This is very...
From the E.A. Jones Early Childhood Center for school purposes to the Board of...
words, I'm going to interrupt you again, and start at the word to transfer. Okay? Fine, okay, all set.
To transfer from the E.A. Jones Early Childhood Center for school purposes to the Board of Selectmen for general municipal purposes, a permanent easement in the property located at 137 Walnut Street, and being more particularly shown as lot numbers 30 and 33 on Assessor's Map 66, containing the E.A. Jones Early Childhood Center for purposes of providing electrical and communication services to the property, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to grant such an easement to the Mass Electric Company, National Grid, upon such terms and in such location on the property as the board deems appropriate, and to execute all documents and instruments necessary to effectuate the purpose of this article and take any other action relative thereto.
Now, you don't put that on there, you should have, or any other enabling authority. I know I'm being picky, but these are very serious technical things. I bring it to your attention. So don't say or any other action relative thereto. It's supposed to say or any other enabling authority. Is there any discussion? It says here, what is printed in the Finance Committee report. You are allowed to put or any other enabling authority, but you're not allowed to put or take any other action relative thereto. Read the recommended motion in the Finance Committee report, not the article.
Mr. Moderator, if I can, I was the one that brought that to the administration's attention, that town council gave us this motion. It went into the book incorrectly. It might have been submitted to them incorrectly, and it might have been printed the way it was submitted, but town council recommended the words that Dr. Rizzi wrote, not or any other enabling authority, should have been, or to take any other action relative
Well,
thereto.
this is where I'm going to disagree with town council, because that wording in there is specific for articles and not motions. We are here taking that other action relative thereto. The words or any other enabling authority allows us to expand upon the citations that allow us to do all of these things. Am I correct, Mr. Riley? He's shaking his head, so
I don't hear the rocks, so.
You said that one.
This is why town meeting takes forever.
Any further questions on what this thing is all about? Since nobody else wants to discuss it any further, if it's not unanimous, I will take a standing count. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, I will declare it unanimous.
I don't have Harry's paper yet. Or should we get these out? I don't.
Now comes the other ones. You have received motions on 522 for Articles 49 and 50. Does the Finance Committee wish to put that on, as they did recommend it?
Mr. Moderator, if I may, through you, just announce to the body of town meeting that we have heard from the MSBA that they are inviting us into a partnership with them on the two items that we're asking you to vote tonight, the west roof and the door windows. So if you vote them tonight, we know that we will be getting the 50% reimbursement that Stoughton is eligible for.
Mr. Hill, abbreviate it, please.
As these are substitute motions, I would just defer to the superintendent of schools unless you'd like me to read them for you, or?
I don't care.
We're talking about Article 49, correct?
That's correct.
I'll read them. Article 49, to appropriate the amount of $830,000 for the purpose of paying costs of the replacement of existing roof system and associated components at the West Elementary School, 1322 Central Street, Stoughton, Mass. 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve the asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA. Said amount to be expended under the direction of the School Facility Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need, as determined by the MSBA. And if the MSBA's Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project, any project cost the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, and that, can we take a cookie break? If invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA. Note, the Massachusetts School Building Authority Associate General Counsel recommended the following revised wording to the school article.
Mr. Hill, I owe you one.
If you wish to make any presentations on this?
As I said, we know that the MSBA will partner with us on this. The district did a roof study several years ago. The west roof has exceeded its lifespan. It was next online, however, we're getting to it a little later than the roof study had suggested, but we are getting to it. And if there are any technical questions, I will ask Mr. Harding, because that may get a little bit out of my area of expertise.
Mr. Crimmins?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. I certainly support both this article and Article 50 regarding these expenditures for these two schools. My question through you, Mr. Moderator, to Dr. Rizzi is, do these articles, or let me stay with Article 49, does this article and the funding for this have any bearing on our ability to go forward on the statements of intent for the high school and the South Elementary School?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker and town meeting. The two things are completely unrelated. The roof and the 2 sets of windows fall under what is known as the Accelerated Repair Program. And they have put all the things that are repairs, they dealt with all those statements of interest first, and they would like the projects completed within 18 months. And in no way does it prejudice or influence the consideration of the statements of interest for replacement or major renovation of buildings. And they've told us that they will be starting on the review of those SOIs in August and September.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rizzi. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Soares?
Joe Soares, Precinct 2. How much is the reimbursement going to be, please?
The reimbursement is 56.6%. That's Stoughton's reimbursement rate based on the formula. And if you add the 3 projects together, the Hanson windows, which were voted last year, the Dahl windows, and the West School roof, the reimbursement is about $1.5 million to the town.
Very good. I'm for this. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gator?
Dennis Gator, Precinct 3. Is there anything that would prevent us from getting that reimbursement? Like time frame, you mentioned 18 months. Are we ready to go on this project, or?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, having been invited into the process and following the steps of the process, which are very carefully laid out, there is no risk that we will not get the reimbursement for this project.
Thank you.
Is there no further questions on the motion? If it's not unanimous, I will take a standing count. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion is carried. It is unanimous.
This is the reimbursement. Okay.
Article 50. Mr. Rizzi?
Mr. Hill, yours or mine?
I'll take it. To appropriate the amount of $945,000 for the purpose of paying costs of the replacement of existing window assemblies and associated components at the Joseph R. Daw Jr. Elementary School, 131 Pine Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of the School Facility Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need, as determined by the MSBA. And if the MSBA Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project, any project costs the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, and that, if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and MSBA.
On the motion? No questions? If that's the case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I declare it unanimous on a voice vote. Article 51, Ms. Sobany was the petitioner of this to make the motion to dismiss, since she is also a town meeting member and a non-vote, the chairman of the school committee.
Okay. So Article 51 is being, I'm asking for a motion, or making a motion to dismiss Article 51, which is being replaced by Article 52.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Article 52. Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $682,000 to implement deferred school facilities maintenance for the town of Stoughton School District as described in the Facilities Master Plan and the Comprehensive Expenditure Plan. Said program includes capital outlay purchases of furniture, fixtures, and accessory equipment for both exterior and interior usage, as well as for contracted mechanical, electrical, security, plumbing installations, and services necessary to comply with applicable established standards and codes, and that to meet the appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $492,000 under General Law, Chapter 44, Sections 7 and 9, and Section 7(3)A, or any other enabling authority, and transfer $190,000 from free cash.
On any presentation? Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. The Finance Committee voted 7-6 to approve this article. I'd like to hear what some of the dissenting voters' votes on the Finance Committee were troubled with.
Does anybody from the Finance Committee wish to respond? I see no. Mr. Hill, do you wish to respond?
There was a general discussion about the town playing catch-up with maintenance. And a lot of the catch-up that we're playing with maintenance has been done through funding through articles at town meeting. So there's a large discussion about whether this list of items, and there were approximately 40 items on the list of things that needed to be taken care of at the schools, qualified to borrow or not borrow. So, and it was, again, part of a roll-up of a discussion about getting caught up on a variety of maintenance items. So you know that we did we passed articles, several articles for the town hall and for the Council on Aging and for the historical building and several others. So that's a bit of what was happening here. We also didn't get an opinion from bond counsel until after the book went to print. So that's why we had to do a substitute motion to figure out what would qualify for borrowing and what would qualify for cash. So I think going forward, what you'll see the Finance Committee do is try to build as much of this, these items, or we'll see the departments build as much of these items into the budgets as we go forward. But there's such a monumental amount of catch-up to do. We've hired a building maintenance supervisor. We're building those line items into the budget today, but there's just too much to be caught up in to catch up on from a budget standpoint.
So the problem was basically how this is going to be funded, whether to borrow or to take from cash.
Pretty much as I recall, Eric, yeah.
All right, that's good enough. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Moderator, through you, to the previous speaker. There was a time when there was a 10% plan in the maintenance budget that Mr. Harding manages, and 10% of all of the fixtures, equipment, things that needed to be replaced were replaced, so that there was a 10-year replacement cycle. In an economic turndown before the most recent one, that plan was reduced first to a 5% plan and then to no plan at all. And we were looking at doing emergency maintenance only and things that were as needed as they came up. And over a period of about 10 or 12 years, this amount of maintenance built up, and having deferred it for such a long period of time, it seemed like a large amount of money to try and roll into the operating budget. So this is trying to make up for the loss of the 10% plan and the 5% plan, because the projects have just backed up as a result.
Mr. DeFelice.
These monies going to be spent on projects in the near future? Are these all, these 5 groupings, are they just pigeonholes to put money into, so as you need it, you would be able to have money to spend?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker. It is the intention to do all of these projects this year, and Mr. Harding always keeps a very detailed spreadsheet when we are permitted to borrow money of how much of the money's been borrowed, what it's been spent on, and if we come in under budget, then how much is available to either not be borrowed or be returned to the town.
Do we have a copy of the spreadsheet that describes, I mean, when I look at this and I see, let's take the larger one, I guess, exterior is $230,000. The way that's written up, what is that specifically going to be used for?
Mr. Moderator, if I may, the detail for all of this breakdown is on page 213 in your books.
Is that the appendix? Okay, thank you.
Ms. Roberts? Please identify yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Roberts, Precinct 6. I'm also a member of the Capital and Financial Planning Advisory Committee. I have a presentation that will be presented later on in the evening, which gives just cause why the funding source for this item should be cash versus borrow. Thank you very much.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Soares?
Joe Soares, Precinct 2. The second, 2 speakers passed, asked a question about if he could have the breakdown. Now, I have page 213 in front of me, and I don't see the breakdown of the question that he asked. Now, yes, but he wanted a breakdown of materials.
Materials.
As far as I'm concerned, the way he asked the question, I don't believe it's explained here. Now, I have I don't know what coral risers are, but you get $6,000 for coral risers. It's about the 8th from the top. They're like stairs?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I could explain.
Dr. Rizzi?
Choral risers are a set of platforms that the chorus stands on when they sing so that the people behind are slightly above the people in front. And the ones we have are old, and they're not the kind of thing that you want to get too rickety because you have children standing on them 2, 3, and 4 feet off the ground.
So you're talking about the safety of the children?
Yes, sir.
You have replaced loading dock doors, 15,000. I always thought dock doors were pretty strong, but apparently.
Perhaps I can ask Mr. Harding to speak to the condition of the loading dock doors, as that would be more in his area of expertise.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding?
These are a set of doors that not only do we need to replace the doors themselves, but the frames need to be replaced, as well as the electronic locking that is on the doors. There's electronic locking on the receiving dock so that we can open the doors remotely without leaving them open at all times.
Thank you. You've got here replace corridors, 84,000. What did the children do to the corridors?
How far down are we looking? In which group?
About the middle, well, actually, you see where it says 209,000? It's 2 up from 209,000.
Replace corridor doors. I will again defer to Mr. Harding.
Fortunately, they've done nothing to the corridor doors. The corridor doors are asbestos-filled. They are beginning to split in certain situations. We've gone in and done some remediation to them, but we need to replace them and get them out of the buildings before they become an issue.
You're replacing them because of the, what's in them? The
Asbestos.
asbestos.
Okay. Replace guidance AC, $50,000. Don't we have a standard AC unit in there?
It's a system, it's not an AC unit, it's not a window unit. It's an AC system in the high school guidance area.
It's broken up,
Multiple
it's
rooms.
broken into zones, is that it?
It's multiple rooms, multiple zones.
So the zone section is broken?
One section is down now, one section is on its way out.
And also, my assumption would be then is that an also cooling unit that goes with that section? I mean, why is it $50,000?
It says replace guidance AC, air conditioning.
Right.
Air conditioning cools.
Okay, and I asked, there's a central air conditioning, you stated,
That's the guidance central air conditioning system is what we're replacing.
oh, so that's attached to X amount of rooms, is that it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I can just elaborate a little bit, the guidance suite has multiple offices. I think it's 6 offices and a main lobby kind of area where children sit and use the computers, and a conference space, and so it's actually quite a length of the B corridor in the high school.
Thank you. On the Dawes School, replace the intercom for $7,000? Is there something wrong with the intercom, or it doesn't work, or you need a new intercom system because you would like it better?
The intercom system is original to the building. The main intercom system has failed. There are cards in the intercom system that can't be replaced. They're no longer made, so the system has to be replaced.
Thank you. Just one other thing. I'm a homeowner. And being a homeowner, the first thing a homeowner does is, when something goes wrong with the exterior or inside, you fix and replace it. Now, what I don't see on here is when I went on that tour for the high school, I saw that there was a vice principal's office that was leaking. I don't see it here or through the whole book that needs to be repaired. Did that seal itself?
If only.
We had a study done regarding the leaks in the guidance office, in the high school principal's office, the assistant principal's office. It's going to cost us approximately $1.5 million to reface the front of B and A buildings to resolve that issue. That is why the SOI for the high school replacement, one of the reasons why the SOI has been submitted for the high school replacement.
You said $8.5 million?
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million, thank you, I'm sorry. Basically, I have one more question. And I know I said that was my last one. Are you telling me that this has been put off before, is that it?
Each of these projects has been put off because of issues related to budget cuts and would have come up in a regular cycle of maintenance and was deferred because what funds were available have been used for things that were more emergency in nature than these items.
Now, you just had a budget increase that the town has voted on and passed. You just had another $308,000 that the town voted on and passed. Obviously, none of that money is going to go for this maintenance. Is that correct?
There is in the operating budget, there is a maintenance budget, and there are projects for all of that money as well. This is just a backlog of things, but with 8 buildings in various stages of age and so on, there is still a whole list of regular projects that are going to be accomplished with the maintenance money in the operating budget.
I'm sorry, the reason why I'm hesitating is I'm trying to think. And I guess what I don't understand is that it seems to take a long time for this to come in front of the town. And I'm not sure if the school's priorities are correct because of all the money we just gave them, and we don't have this done yet. I think maybe we should think about this article, and although I'm for repairing infrastructure, it's the best thing that we can do in this town, in any town, but obviously we don't do that in Massachusetts very well. But I'm not sure if by passing this, we're doing ourselves a favor, because we need to take care of our maintenance of our buildings a lot sooner than we're doing it now. And I think the school is asking for more money and neglecting the buildings for their repairs. So, again, I'm for repairing the schools, but I'm not for this article. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen? Any further questions? If not, I'm going to go to voting on the article, on the motion itself. And that is, I'm going to just is to appropriate $682,000 and the selectmen to borrow $492,000 and transfer $190,000 from free cash. As this is a borrowing and there is some indication of possibly not a unanimous vote, all those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account. Precinct 1.
12.
Precinct 1 is 12. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 12. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 12. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 10. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 13. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 8. Precinct 7. 7 is 11. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
I have 0 with 1 abstention. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Mr. O'Regan. All right. 1.
1.
You have.
Precinct 2.
Okay. Precinct 2. Precinct 2, 2. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 2. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 4. Precinct 5. 0. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 7. Precinct 6 is 7. Precinct 7. 1. Precinct 7 is 1. Precinct 8. 1. Precinct 8 is 1. How many yes? 87 yes, 18 no. The motion is more than 2/3. It is approved. 87 yes, 18 no. That's 2/3. Article 53. Mr. Hill?
That the town appropriate $285,000 to replace and / upgrade network hardware in the 8 school buildings and 6 municipal buildings, and that to meet this appropriation, $272,000, it says $272, but, oh, I'm sorry, it is $272, be transferred from Article 6 of the special town meeting of March 2007, Department 9230. $185 be transferred from Article 7 of the special town meeting March 2007, Department 9231. $576 be transferred from Article 8 of the special town meeting of March 2007, Department 9232, and that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $283,967 under General Law, Chapter 44S, Section 7, 28, or any other enabling authority.
Ms. Rizzi, do you want to make?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, through you to town meeting. This is the network infrastructure for the entire town. I'm going to ask Dr. Gray to come up and answer some of the specific questions, but the network carries data, voice, and video traffic. So the purpose of the upgrade is to improve our network reliability and capacity and to reduce energy consumption, because the new hardware will require a lot less energy because it generates less heat, and it will upgrade our system to 10 gigabytes. And we've now gotten to the end of my technical knowledge, so Dr. Gray can answer more technical questions.
Dr. Gray? Yes, I don't see any. There are some people asking. Mr. DeFelice? I don't know which one all right. I don't want to be considered biased.
Just a little bit of clarification. Are these various articles that these are taken from, but that's just unspent money that's left over?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that question first of the previous speaker. These previous articles, were they school articles or municipal articles where you're taking this money from?
They were any articles that were 2008 or prior that the department heads could be released. I don't know which departments, if it was school or town.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I don't know if that, is that a technicality? Can the school use previously approved articles for the municipal side to fund some of their stuff?
If I may, Mr. Moderator, through you, just briefly say this is not just the school's network. It is the network for all of the town buildings.
Mr. Rowe, did you want?
Well, could you, it says here 8 buildings. Which buildings are they?
6 town buildings.
Doesn't say that. Well, in the very, the headline says replace in 8 school buildings.
You have to read the text.
You have to read what?
You have to read the text of the recommendation.
Why doesn't it say that where the articles?
School buildings and 6 municipal buildings.
I see it in the title.
Okay, at the end of the paragraph, in the smaller print, okay. Now, all the schools are involved, right? All your buildings? Okay. Now, why would we, you folks are telling us that we're going to get a new high school and a new south school. Why would we be spending money in those 2 buildings if the plan is to demo those in the near future? Why would we, and probably, I probably should have asked that question on the previous article too. Why are we putting money into buildings that you folks are telling us that are no good and have to be replaced?
It isn't yet clear when the new, if the SOIs are approved for high school and/or south school. We're still looking a fair distance into the future, but this network can be moved.
Well, I know if I were demoing my house, I wouldn't be putting anything new into it. So I want to know why. Well, let me ask you the question this way: how much of this money is for the high school, and how much of it is for the south?
Well, I just want to reiterate, though, that the network can be moved, so it can be moved to a new building, and I don't know, do we have the breakdown of how much for each building? You have to do the whole thing, right?
Please go to the microphone.
Two biggest networks in the town are in this building and in the middle school. Approximately half, maybe 40% of that is these 2 buildings. The south is one of the smallest networks. It has a single network closet and has, I think from memory, I think it has 8 switches. It's a very small amount of money and a very small network closet.
So
if that school were to be built in the next 2 or 3 years, you could in fact take this equipment and move it. It's just hardware. It's in a rack. It's rack-mounted hardware.
So you would say about 50% of the requests would be used in the high school in the south?
No, about 25% in the high school and probably 5%, I'm just
What was
guessing.
the 40% thing you just gave me?
Middle school and high school,
Oh, together.
both two buildings.
So
The two biggest buildings with the most kids, yeah,
So your total for the two schools is approximately?
40%. So 20% here, and about 5% in the south school.
That's 25%?
20% in this building approximately, and about 5% in the south school.
So about 25% of this article would be for the two buildings under consideration of being replaced.
But they may not be replaced from scratch, they may not be replaced for several years. This equipment is more than 10 years old that we're replacing. It served its useful life, way past its useful life. It's out of warranty, it's no longer supported by the manufacturer, and we'll probably have 5 years or more before we'll see a new building, right?
I don't know. You folks will have to tell us that.
I have no idea, but I know it takes a long time to get a design, get the money, get a design, and get a building built. It's not going to happen overnight.
Well, I'd be opposed to spending the entire amount, especially if 25% is going to go into buildings that you plan to demolish. Doesn't make sense to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to
Mr.
the
Murphy.
town accountant. I thought that we brought up the issue that all these borrowing articles would have sunsets on them. This is going back a couple of years ago. And not one article in the past 2 years has there been any sunset put on these borrowing articles. So now we end up with money that is just sitting on the books. Whatever happened to that plan?
Mr. Rowe?
I don't think we ever took any formal action as far as sunsetting articles. There are towns that have ordinances or bylaws whereby, or policies whereby articles close out after a certain period of time. But I don't recall we ever took any formal vote to do anything. I don't recall the Finance Committee ever taking a formal vote to sunset any articles, so.
It was discussed, though.
Yeah, what we did is, we do periodically go back and look at old borrowing authorizations and then rescind those. And we did that this year. There were three articles whereby we closed out the authorizations, the line of credit to borrow. But if I could just elaborate, Mr. Moderator, on, as we go through these borrowing articles, you're going to see a lot of money, unspent, what that is unspent proceeds. So the theory behind using the unspent proceeds is to use the cash that we have in hand rather than borrowing new money for the entire project. So the first step in that process is to identify what projects have been completed and have borrowing proceeds left over. So that would be step number one. Step number two would be to identify what was the term of those bonds that were issued. And step number three would be to look at the warrant and identify what articles what's the statutory borrowing term of the articles in the warrant. And the general rule is that you can use unspent borrowing proceeds for another project which has the same borrowing period or longer. So for example, if you had a 5-year bond, it could be used for another 5-year project. And it doesn't have to be school within school, or municipality within municipality, or enterprise within enterprise. It's town-wide. So the general rule is you can use unspent proceeds for another project for the same borrowing period or longer. So a 5-year unspent proceeds from a 5-year bond can be used for a 5, 10, or 20-year project. So as you go through and you see these borrowing articles, I just want you to understand those. We're trying to close out some of this old cash that we had and use it up. So
I just see money here that has been left on the table, and this, to me, the amount of money that is borrowed, is sitting out there, is not a large amount. But it's the practice that we have, that when we borrow money and we keep it in the back pocket, we're paying interest on that. We're not doing anything with it. And again, because the door was open, I'm jumping on it. It's a case of where we have to start putting sunsets on these articles. Thank you.
Mr. Roy.
Dave Lurie, Precinct 6, and I have a couple technical questions, technology questions. I respect the answer about forklifting out new network equipment that could be put into a new school. I'll stipulate that I understand that that would work. My question has to do with the capacity of the network equipment we have today. What kind of capacity is the network able to handle today? Is it 10, 100 gig? What is the capacity of the network?
So what we have today is a mix. We've upgraded some critical areas in the cores where we originally had 100 gig and then 10 gig to the desktop all throughout the building and switching. We've done some, by buying some refurbished equipment, used equipment, we were able to upgrade some of the core areas. But we basically now have a gig in the core and 100 meg to the desktop in general, which is behind the times, if you will. And this is going to take us to 10 gig in the core, 10 gig across the fibers, 10 gig across the closets in the two large buildings, and give us a substantial improvement. And as well as the hardware will sustain going to 40 if we want to go to 40 sometime down the road. We don't need that at this time, and it's kind of expensive.
If we have, this question through the moderator, I'd like to ask is, the network today has cabling going around, as you just mentioned, to each device that these students or faculty will be using. If they're getting new equipment, but their capacity to their device is small, too small to use the capacity that you're going to invest in, don't you see an overkill situation where there's more investment into the devices that the users can never actually get use of? There's a bottleneck from them trying to see this terrific new equipment. Where is the...
That's not correct. Fortunately, when I did the wiring here, and I did the design of all the wiring in all these buildings except the middle school, we used Cat5e wiring, which will carry a gigabyte to the desktop, absolutely no problem at all. So there's no wiring issues at all. We use fiber between all the closets. In fact, put in redundant fiber between all the closets. So we've got a fiber, basically a fiber infrastructure between wiring closets. We've had one for years. And we have basically Cat5e wire going right to the desktop. We can carry at least a gig to the desktop. No problem at all.
Okay.
Any classroom.
So the investment will not be...
No, we made an investment, the town, we together made a huge investment in wiring all these buildings, and we did it correctly, and that's why we can do this.
And how long ago was that done?
That was done about 10 or more years ago.
Okay, because that part of the infrastructure will not survive the demo that we were talking about earlier, correct?
Absolutely not. They would have to put that in, but it's a very minor cost of a building project.
When you're putting in a new building?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Ms. Bronson?
Denise Bronston, Precinct 8. I'd like to get someone from the Capital and Finance Planning Advisory Committee to give their opinion as to whether this should be a cash or a borrow situation. Is there anyone that would, from that committee, that would come up and give their 2 cents on how to spend this money?
Do you have any answer?
Either through a debt or through cash spending.
Mr. O'Regan?
Mr. Moderator, Bob O'Regan for the Board of Selectmen. Members of the committee are out back. You'll see, I don't know if any of you have it handy, the grid that was passed out at the beginning of town meeting, warrant article by warrant article. This shows that the Capital and Financial Planning Committee agreed with FinCom on the borrowing for, this is Article 53. And I just ask members of the body to compare the nature of the spending listed on page 213, the previous article, with this one, to begin to develop a sense of where some of the focus is on cash or borrowing for articles. This one would seem to fit more into the nature of a true longer-term capital improvement for which we believe, the selectmen believe, and the capital committee advises that they believe would be suitable for borrowing.
Mr. Rock?
John Rock, Precinct 3. Move the question, and can we please move this meeting along?
On the motion to cut off debate, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Well, I'll declare it's a vote to cut off debate. On the original motion, since this is a borrowing, I'm going to have a standing count. And it is, I'll just sum it up, it's to appropriate $285,000 to replace and upgrade the network hardware, of which $272 and these other itemized transfers, so that only the borrowing is amounts to $283,767. All of those in favor, please rise and Chairman take count. Precinct 1. 13. Precinct 1 is 13. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 15. Precinct 3. 13. Precinct 3 is 13. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5. 13. Precinct 5 is 13. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 11. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 10. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 10. All those opposed, please rise. Jim, take count. Precinct 1.
0.
0. Precinct 2. 1. Precinct 2 is 1. Precinct 3. 2. Precinct 3 is 2. Precinct 4. 0. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. 0. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 4. Precinct 6 is 4. Precinct 7. 1. Precinct 7 is 1. Precinct 8. 0. Precinct 8 is 0. 99 to 8. 99 yes, 8 no. The motion is approved. And we go on.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Article 24, ID 55, to rescind unissued borrowing authorizations. Mr. Hill.
That the town will vote to rescind the unissued borrowing authorizations on previously voted town meeting articles prior to 2009, listed below as approved by the department heads. And I'll just go through the amounts. Amount $80,000 Fennel and McNamara water wells replacement, $90,000 sewer collection system rehab, and $17,000 school science lab conversion.
Is there any discussion on this? There being none, that this just simply requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous by voice vote. Article 25, ID 56, federal reimbursement of Chapter 766 Health Services.
That the town vote to appropriate $25,000 to pay for services in order to recover federal reimbursement of health-related services provided to Chapter 766 students, and to meet this appropriation, $15,000 be transferred from free cash and $10,000 be transferred from Article 31 of Annual Town Meeting of 2007.
Any discussion? This only requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I'm going to declare it unanimous. There we go. Now. Article 26. Now I'm going to, before we put this motion on the floor, you received a green piece of paper today in the bundle. A motion on this. We did make a point that if something was brought in the same night, we would not vote on it unless this meeting feels that they have enough information. So I'm going to just ask for a motion to suspend the rules so that we can put this one on. On to suspend the rules to allow Article 26 to go on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to pay unpaid bills from prior fiscal years in excess of departmental appropriations in the amount of $383.98, and that to meet this appropriation, $383.98 be raised in the tax levy.
Any discussion? Mr. Hanson.
I just have to know, what is inspired technology?
Mr. Rowe.
I'm envisioning a tent revival with iPads or something, you know,
Inspired Technology and Communication out of Rainham, Bridgewater, one or the other, is our, maintains our ComDial phone system, both in the town buildings, and I think in the school buildings as well.
Well, thank you for that inspiration, thank you.
If this not be unanimous, unpaid bills from a prior fiscal year require a four-fifths vote at an annual town meeting. So if there's any doubt, I will have to have a recorded vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, I will declare it unanimous. Article 27 is the Community Preservation Committee's 2014 budget. Mr. Hill.
We just had one recommendation, right? That the town vote to appropriate a reserve from Community Preservation Fund annual revenues or available funds, the amounts recommended by the Community Preservation Committee for committee administrative expenses, debt service, community preservation projects, and other expenses in fiscal year 2014, with each item to be considered in a separate appropriation. Appropriations, Community Preservation Administrative Expenses, $32,034. Long-term debt service, $143,950. Short-term debt service, $18,300. Under reservations, community housing, $64,068. Historic resources, $64,068. Open space, $64,068. FY 2014 budgeted annual reserve, $1,401,088.
Any discussion? This is the general budget for the Community Preservation Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, I will declare it unanimous. Now, under Article 28, ID 12, because these are mixed between borrowings and transfers, each one of the A, B, C, D, and E of 28, Article 28, will be voted separately. So for 28A, I recognize the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee, Mr. Morton, to begin with 28A.
John Morton, Precinct 3, and Chair of the Community Preservation Committee. You received at the last meeting a form of motion, a printed form. It looks like this. It basically says, I guess I'll make the motion. Move that the sum of $250,000 is approved by the Community Preservation Committee be used for the purpose of procuring architectural, engineering, and construction services for the rehabilitation of the exterior of the Stoughton Railroad Station to protect and preserve this historic building, which is listed on the National Historic Register, and that $250,000 be borrowed by authorizing the treasurer with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to borrow the sum of $250,000 pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 11, or any other enabling authority, including but not limited to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7 and 8, and to issue bonds and notes therefore, which borrowing is intended to be repaid from the funds set aside for such purpose in the Town of Stoughton Community Preservation Fund. If there is a sale or other disposition of the building by the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, then the net proceeds of the sale, after closing ordinary and necessary costs, will be distributed to the Community Preservation Fund in the ratio that the total amount of cash expended from the Community Preservation Fund for the project, including without limitation closing costs, attorney's fees, fees of bond counsel, interest and principal paid on bonds, through the closing and all other ordinary and necessary costs, which is defined as the total CPA expenditures, bears to the total cost of the project, including all reasonable unreimbursed costs expended by Stoughton Redevelopment Authority in connection with the purchase and the sale of the building, plus all of the total CPA expenditures. Such repayment to the Community Preservation Fund to continue until the full amount of the total CPA expenditures shall have been reimbursed to the CPA funds. If the total receipts do not permit 100% reimbursement of the total CPA expenditures to the Community Preservation Fund, upon the repayment of the smaller amount due to the Community Preservation Fund under the foregoing formula, no further amounts shall be payable to the Community Preservation Fund hereunder. The historical aspect of the building will be protected through the and covenants in the deeds and standards established by the Massachusetts Historical Commission. To explain the motion, the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority came before our committee and told us that they would like to buy the building. The substance of the reasons for buying might be explained by the Redevelopment Authority, but suffice it to say that the cost of the purchase was $350,000, and there was a grant or promise from the state to reimburse or to give a grant to the Redevelopment Authority for half that price. So the net cost to the Redevelopment Authority would be $175,000. But the building needed some repairs. The intention of the Redevelopment Authority was to basically stabilize the building and then see if there was someone in the private sector willing to take the building, buy the building, subject to historic preservation restrictions, and pay for that. And it was estimated that if we were successful in the marketplace, the amount returned to the Redevelopment Authority would be more than the Redevelopment Authority actually spent for the project. With that in mind, the Community Preservation Committee agreed to basically pay for the repairs necessary to stabilize the building. That was estimated, and it was estimated pursuant to a real careful study at $250,000. But the CPA thought that if we paid $250,000 to stabilize the building, and that would mean maybe repair the roof and do things that would be of permanent value to the building, and the building was sold later, then some of that money ought to go back to the redevelopment, to the Community Preservation Committee. It being thought that if we were to basically put $250,000 of community development funds in it, and then it was sold at a much higher price, that would be akin to transferring $250,000 to the Redevelopment Authority. And rather than that, we thought that if there was to be a payback, we would split the dollars coming back just like, almost like a mortgage. Half would, $1 would come back to the redevelopment authority, $1 would come back to the Community Preservation Fund until the Community Preservation Fund was totally paid back. Then any other proceeds would go directly to the redevelopment authority. And it would be hoped that the redevelopment authority would come out ahead in that process. And in fact, that's a reasonable expectation, given the quality of the building, the location of the building, and the plans underway to revitalize the whole center with the station as a centerpiece of that rehabilitation. So what this memo says in a whole bunch of legalese is we would advance $250,000, which would be a borrowing. It would be a borrowing to be repaid from the historic component of the CPA funds, not from the general budget of the town. We would allow the money to be used to rehabilitate, basically to do the structural repairs necessary to stabilize the building. And then when and if the building is sold, the money would come back to the CPA fund until the CPA fund were paid in full, and any further proceeds would go to the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority. That's the nature of the motion.
Mr. Lindwall?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Forrest Lindwall, Precinct 5, and member of Redevelopment Authority. Just to give you a status update, I hope you took the opportunity to read what we did put together for this, because there is some fascinating reading on the history and what the town has done in the past to basically rehabilitate the interior of the building, and it is in marvelous shape. There are some photos in there of the interior of the structure. The Redevelopment Authority made a commitment to the Board of Selectmen to assist the town in the acquisition of the train station from the MBTA. I wish I could sit here tonight and say we have a scheduled closing. We're still on track, but it's not happened to date. We're still probably a couple of weeks away. But so far, the Redevelopment Authority has invested $20,000 in due diligence. We did a complete land survey of the entire parcel, not just the depot. We did a Phase 1 21E environmental assessment. We did a title search, and we did an independent appraisal, as well as the building inspection, which I summarized on the last page of the handout that we passed out. We do have approval from the MBTA for the plan. And the plan is 2 parcels of land. One is the depot building and the 7 spaces immediately to the rear of the building, and a separate parcel, which would be the 23 parking spaces extending from the back of the sidewalk adjacent to the Stoughton Bakery all the way back along that same side abutting the post office. So it would be 2 separate parcels of land. And then there would be obviously cross easements back and forth. Excuse me. We are still dealing with some of the finer points of the deed. The major obstacle and the only thing really preventing us to go to a closing immediately is the extrication of $175,000 from the transportation bond bill. I believe that we've been told our legislative group, Senator Joyce and Representatives Kafka and Galvin, are working on getting that money freed up for us. Until that happens, obviously, we're kind of in a state of a limbo. One of the key factors in all of this is what is it that we're trying to do in terms of the sale, and what are we looking for in terms of uses? And I'm going to yield to Vice Chair Lou Gito, who will address those issues.
Mr. Gito?
Good evening. The Redevelopment Authority got into this endeavor at the request of the Board of Selectmen because they saw, and we see, that the train station is one of the linchpins in sort of redeveloping the downtown. It's a beautiful building. It's a historic building. It should be preserved, and it should be used in a proper fashion. Mr. Lindwall, myself, and several other people have gone to restaurants in other communities that have been built in or put into railroad stations. We're not sure what what we will get at the end of the process in terms of someone to move in there, but we want to have a use of that building that is going to basically be a draw on the community, for the community, to get people to come to the downtown. It's part of what we're trying to do in terms of the master plan for the downtown. We need to redevelop the downtown. The theater is hopefully going to be redeveloped soon, and there's a lot of other things that have to happen. But we need to begin to preserve those things that are in good shape and really represent what the downtown can become. So we need to get something in there that is going to draw a lot of people to the downtown so that they can shop in other places in the downtown as well. We're not sure whether we're going to sell it or whether we're going to lease it. If we sell it, we have to make sure that we have restrictions on use of that property in perpetuity so that it doesn't get turned into something that really doesn't represent what we need to do to continue to get people drawn to the downtown. So that's the story.
Mr. DeFelice.
I had several questions. A grant was referred to. Could that be described as to where the grant would come from? How much is the grant? And I guess it's something that's out there in limbo or space or whatever, but a little detail on the grant as to where it's coming from and the likelihood that we're going to get it and what we have to do to get it.
Mr. Gito, you say you have the answers to some of those questions?
The legislature last year in July passed passed a bill that included a $175,000 to come to to be paid for a grant to purchase the property, and also provided another $175,000 loan to the town to be paid off over a 10-year period at 0% interest. The money is somewhere. It hasn't been released. It is a transportation bond bill of last year, though. Is that correct? For 2012. Does that help, Eddie? Or previous speaker?
Thank you. Thank you, Lou. Also, there was a comment was made that we have to do this to stabilize the building. When someone tells me they have to stabilize a building, that tells me that the building's ready to fall down. That was by a previous speaker. Then another previous speaker said the interior was in excellent shape. So these things are somewhat diametrically opposed. If the building needs to be stabilized so that it doesn't fall down, I mean, what else would the word stabilization mean, right? And we've been told that the interior is still in good shape. So I'd like to know, when you're telling us about stabilizing the building, what does that mean?
Mr. Lindwall?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Perhaps the word stabilization, which was used by Mr. Morton, is not the appropriate term. What we want to do is to repair those parts of the exterior of the building the copper flashing on the roof, the shingles that are displaced, the windows that allow weather intrusion. There's an opening on the clock tower. Last winter, we had one window blowout, and it's just covered over with plywood. We want to, in essence, seal the envelope rather than stabilize the building. It's a granite stone building. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't need to be stabilized. But there is water intrusion that is affecting some of the woodwork on the interior, and that's because of the decorative copper flashing that you see on the top and between the joints, and as I said, the displacement of several of the slate roof tiles. That's the type of work that we're talking about. Most of the money is in that copper flashing work and the decorative copper repair. But as I said, there is some water intrusion that is beginning to show up on the woodwork inside, and we want to do that. The timing of the sale is probably not going to occur before this winter is our main concern. And before we go through another winter, we'd like to retain an architect with historic preservation expertise and put together a set of bid documents so that come September, October, we can get this work done and have a watertight sealed building, if you will, for the wintertime.
Thank you. Also, there's a notation here that says that the Municipal Operations Committee, motion by Scott Hersey, seconded by Joe Source, to disapprove this article, and was voted unanimously. I'd like to hear from somebody on that committee as to why they voted unanimously not to favor this article. If there's anybody here
Anybody from
that committee?
Mr. Murphy?
Peter Murphy, Municipal Operations Committee. This article came before us, and at the time it came before us, number one, we don't own the building. Number two, there's a lot of money being spent on this building, and not a lot of people come up to talk one way or the other. I don't know if the town really wants this building, and that's what our committee come up with. It's a case of where we know that the MBTA is going to do something with that track. We know we want to do something with the town. We know there's going to be money coming from the state. There's so many unanswered questions here. It's like, why do we put money up when there's so many uncertainties? One of the other issues that came up was, as you heard from a previous speaker, the building comes with 7 parking spots. Then there's a potential of other parking spots. If any restaurant was to go in there to only have 7 spots, it's not going to draw a big crowd. It is not going to be the big moneymaker that anybody thinks it is. Now, whether or not they can use the MBTA parking lot after hours, I don't know. I don't know what the legalities of that is. That's what our committee come up with. That's why we're opposed to this.
Mr. Lindwell to respond.
Thank
to
you.
that.
I think,
Mr.
I think I have the floor,
Please.
sir.
Mr. Lindwall asked to make a response to the...
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, it's understood that if there's no acquisition of the building, there's no expenditure of CPC funds, but as far as the town having the desire to purchase the building, the Board of Selectmen had a public hearing. Essentially, the overwhelming majority of the people spoke in favor of it, and the Board of Selectmen wrote a letter to the MBTA, who had the project out to bid for general, to anyone to bid on it. That bid opportunity was rescinded by the MBTA, allowing the town to be the exclusive purchaser of the building. We are well aware that a good restaurant would love to have as many parking spaces as they can have. The train station deluxe diner in Newton Center, which is a very similar building to this, the very going concern, has 0 parking spaces. Everything is on the street at parking meters, and you do not get a seat anytime during the day on Saturday or Sunday for brunch. It is our intent to utilize all 30 spaces if necessary. It's not just the 7 behind the building. It's 23 additional spaces along the side. I think our intent would be that at a minimum, we would sell 7 and have a permanent easement for 8 spaces, but if in fact the price is right and we can sell all 30 spaces, we would certainly do that. We can sell the 2 parcels of land.
Quick question to the previous speaker. I think at one of the hearings, or perhaps I read it in your minutes, that there was a situation with the property line on the building side at the platform, to the point that if you had to do any repairs on that side of the building, you'd be on the MBTA property. Has that been resolved?
Mr. Lindwall.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Because of the close proximity of the building as you face it, the left side, it is very, very close, about 19 feet from the center line of the tracks. The Mass Bay commuter rail are the ones that actually operate the rail system, and they have insurance requirements if you are within a certain distance from the center line of an active rail line, even though it may be on the weekends. And there was a car that came down Saturday during this Stoughton Farmers Market, a work train, if you will. So the property line on that side is actually set right on the face of the building as it jogs around, if you take a close look at it. And that's the words in the deed that we are presently negotiating in terms of what that distance could be reduced to. If not, then yes, it's just a liability insurance requirement that we can certainly make the repairs, but we would have to go through and get a particular license from the Mass Bay Commuter Rail, and then pay for specific liability insurance. But something that is probably going to be a day's worth of work at most is a part of this borrowing that we're talking about.
Thank you. I think what we're being asked to do here, Town of Stoughton is being asked to become a real estate agent. Now, last year when Senator Joyce was here, he talked about the station, gave us several options, as I recall. I'm sorry, perhaps it was at the Selectmen's meeting. One of the options that he mentioned was, I remember him saying that perhaps the best thing for the Town of Stoughton to do would be to just step aside, and if there's such a demand for someone to put a restaurant in a very, very tiny space, then those people would come forward. So I think the senator had a good point. I don't see why we're going to build it, we're going to acquire a building, put a lot of money into it. You know, when you put this estimate of $250,000, I don't think I've seen, I don't know if anyone else has seen a written estimate. Who did the estimate? I have no idea. I have not seen that estimate in writing. Does that exist? In the back of the package. Okay. So I think what we're being asked to do is become a real estate agent. And I don't think any municipality, including the Town of Stoughton, should be involved in that. If that property is so desirable for a restaurant, somebody will come forward and purchase it. For us to be flipping property doesn't ring true to me. I mean, we're the municipality. There are people in the private sector that do that for a living. Let them do it if there's such a demand for it. I don't think there is a demand to put a restaurant in there because I think the space is too small. I believe, I haven't been to the one in Newton, but I know a few folks have. I believe the one in Newton has a much larger square footage of floor space, as well as the one in Bridgewater. So who is going to go there? We're going to be stuck with another building, and we're going to be continually sinking money into it. It's an old building, and I don't think this $250,000 is the end of the story. So I would hope that we don't get into the real estate business. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. I heard sale, I heard lease. If this is going to be leased, will there be any CPC money going to it, to the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee?
Mr. Morton?
Well, the answer was no, there would not. All right, so then if it's leased, then we don't have to worry about where the money goes when it comes back, and there will be no preservation for it if it's leased. All right, I understand it. Thank you.
Mr. Paul Smith?
I heard a couple of terms. One was that this is going to be a draw on the town. Yes, it's going to be a draw on the town.
Closer to the mic.
You asked for it.
I misunderstood.
You misunderstood everything.
Yeah. I misunderstood his question. I gave the wrong. May I just correct my answer?
Mr. Morton, please correct your question, and then Mr. Smith.
I believe your question was that if it was leased, would we still spend the 250, or would we get the 250 back?
It was whether we would go forward as in this 28A.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes, we would go forward. The 250 would be spent to do the repairs that have been described. If the redevelopment authority buys the building, it will pay $175,000, get a grant for $175,000, and the $175,000 that it pays will be basically an interest-free loan over 10 years from the state.
So I understand if it's sold, how you would get money back. The CPC would get money back. If it's leased, this 28A does not tell me how the money would get back. It would not come back.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we get a $175,000 loan to pay for half of this place. The state's giving us half of the money. That's my understanding. What is the value of the property? What has it been appraised for?
Mr. Lindwell?
$350,000. Yes. So we're going to put $250,000 to it. We're paying $175,000. It's been appraised for $300,000.
You're going to have a tenant fit up inside.
And then you're going to have to fit it. So we're going to lose money on it.
No.
Well, the appraised price is less than the cost.
The appraisal cost is to purchase it as is.
Please go to the microphone for the broadcast.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The question was asked, what was the appraised value? The appraised value of the building was $350,000. That is also the minimum purchase price and will be the negotiated purchase price with the MBTA. The $250,000, the estimate is included as the last page in Article 28A package that we presented, is for the exterior. There would also then be interior tenant fit-up, if you will, that would include redoing bathrooms to handicap accessibility requirements, mechanical, electrical system upgrades, and whatever furnishings that someone wants to do. I think it's important to understand that we're not going to lose money on this thing. That's not our intent. The Station Deluxe Diner in Newton, no parking spaces, same size footprint, was acquired for $965,000. We're not going to sell it. We're not going to give it away. And it isn't the town. It's going to be the redevelopment authority. The town is not becoming the landlord here. It's becoming the redevelopment authority, and it is our goal, okay, to have it be sold off to someone that will be controlled by the historic covenants, okay, that will be in place. If the MBTA just sells it off to anyone, then I think the town will have more of a problem because you won't have those controls.
Mr. Smith, continue.
It's already been a historic building, right?
Yes, on the National Historic.
Right, but there's no control, no protection for that.
Yes.
There is protection for that already?
Yes.
Okay. So we're not going to put any more protection on it?
We're going to use
Shall I go over there and we'll debate?
That's
back and
okay, no,
forth?
we'll stay right here.
Okay. Flores and I both right.
The question with respect to historical controls, the deed that will come to us has a historic covenants from the Massachusetts Historical Society. It is already in place, was put there by the MBTA, and that will come to us in that deed. And we will take that forward, as well as whatever discussions we might have going forward with the Stoughton Historical Commission. And it requires any changes to the building from the exterior or the interior that would in any way violate the integrity of its historic significance has to be, those plans have to be approved by Massachusetts Historical Society.
Okay. Well, one of the first things that I've noticed is Newton is not Stoughton. The center of Newton is way different than the center of Stoughton. So I can see why the diner in downtown Newton would make money. I don't think the one in downtown Stoughton is going to make any money. But now we're going to buy a piece of, or supposedly going to buy a piece of property that we can't walk around because they own right up to here. I wouldn't buy that piece of property. But you're the ones that are going to buy it, not me. Now, it's a wonderful building. It's beautiful. It's a great building for a railroad station. And that's all it is a railroad station. I look at all of the other buildings that this town owns and the condition they're in and what we've been doing, and we're adding to it. We're going to take this on spec. Maybe we can sell it. We might find somebody. We may do this. We may do that. I don't think we need this. We got enough on our plates. That's just my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dick Fitzgerald, Precinct 3. I'm actually going to go down a different track with this. I'm sorry. All right. Many years ago, the MBTA made a determination that the people coming up Route 24 in the morning spent too much time in traffic, so they've decided that they are going to extend the rail line and call it the South Coast Rail Extension to Taunton, Fall River, New Bedford. And many years ago, the design coming through Stoughton was for 2 tracks, high-speed and regular. I'll stand corrected if somebody can add to this and tell me that's not what it is. But the most important thing is that the MBTA, when they went to design this, had sought to do what they did at Canton, at the Canton Junction. They jacked the building up and they moved the building. One of the original plans was to take this building and move it across the street, unbelievable as it seemed, to where the Napa store was. Don't know if any of this is still on the table, but my concern is that if there's 2 high-speed tracks coming through Stoughton, and we're going to be putting money into a building that, in speculation, we're going to turn over and sell, what's the impact, if there is any? I'd like to ask the question of anybody from the South Coast Rail or anything, what is the impact to the town of Stoughton with this particular piece of property? Can somebody answer that? Board of Selectmen, anybody?
Mr. Lindwall?
Based on my reading of the South Coast Rail Plan, a second track would be added. It would be added on the far side of the existing track from the depot building. There'd be absolutely no suggestion of shifting or moving the train station from its present location. So the track would basically be on the trackside plaza, if you will, for the addition of the second track. I don't know beyond that, any great detail as far as, I never saw a plan that suggested that anyone wanted to move this building, but again, I'll repeat, the MBTA entered into this historical commission covenants with Mass Historic. So the MBTA is aware of their own covenant is on them, not on us at the moment.
Mr. Moderator, I can address the South Coast Rail issue.
The governor included further funding for further development of the South Coast Rail in the proposal he sent to the legislature for his transportation program. When it came out of the legislature, the South Coast Rail project wasn't even on the caboose. So it would seem, even though we still have to finish the federal regulatory review process on environmental, it would seem that the South Coast Rail expansion, if it happens, is not in the current scheme of planning. And so I'd ask if we can, if I may, Mr. Moderator, just think about not being stuck on what other people may or may not do whenever in the future, and try to decide our own priorities for ourselves. Otherwise, we will never get anywhere, except where we don't want to used to be. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Moderator, if I could respond to that. I think if you are dealing with anything to do with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the MBTA or whoever it might be, I believe they're going forward, or they will somehow. Maybe the money isn't there today, maybe it's not there tomorrow, next year, or whatever. But I think at some point in time, the money will be there because the legislative body in southeastern Massachusetts that sits on Beacon Hill seems to be pretty powerful. And they want this down there. They want it, and it's not just for commuter rail, it's for freight. I stood here a couple of years ago and said the very same thing. So I'm wondering if we are saying, no, let's not even think about that. Let's put that aside because it's never going to happen. And we all live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we know what happens when we say it's never going to happen. It happens. So I don't know about this. I think we have to think this one out. I think we have to slow it down and think whether or not this is the right way to go. If we find out that there's going to be 2 tracks coming through here. Previous speaker did mention that it's, I believe the comment was statement was 19 feet from center of the track. Now we're going to add a second track in, so where's that go? Do they take, obviously they're going to take land by eminent domain. I would assume they're going into the old Cochrane property, Mr. Kelly's property, but how much further do they expand over, and what do they actually have to do? And I don't think we have any control of that because the land, the rail itself is owned by the MBTA, and the federal government has control over that. So I'd be cautious with this. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Gito to respond.
I've been on the South Coast Rail Committee for the last, good Lord, I don't know, maybe 10 years, something like that. The Corps of Engineers was supposed to make a decision last fall on the environmental impact report. They haven't done that yet. It's unclear when that's going to happen. As a previous speaker on the Board of Selectmen said, the money is not in the bond bill for this year for transportation, and it's not likely to be on for several years in the future. The question, I think, oh, and one other thing, there would have to be note-taking on for the South Coast Rail if they put 2 rails through there, because the right-of-way is large enough, and they wouldn't move the rail that's as close to the station as it is now closer to the station. That would be crazy and unlikely and would not happen. I think the issue before us is, do we want to include the train station in a proposal to upgrade the town? And do we want to have any control of what that use is going to be in that station? We have been embarked on for the last year working with the MBTA to try to go through all the hoops, make sure that the property was surveyed properly, that we did all the 21E work and so on and so forth in order to acquire that property and protect it for the town. the Board of Selectmen had asked the MBTA to allow the town to purchase that property. So, if you don't want the property, you don't want it protected, then probably you should vote no. But I think that would be a shame. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's a historic piece of property. It's one of the 2 historic pieces of property in the downtown area. And I think that we ought to protect it. I think that we ought to protect the uses of that property. And I think that if we want to do what the townspeople have said in the first phase of the master planning, that you want to improve the downtown, then maybe this is a good place to start. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Mr. Recupero.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll be very, very brief. The way I'm hearing the discussion, it sounds like this is money that's being spent out of the general fund. I know that's not the intention, but this is coming from CPA. I like the substitute motion with the borrowing plan. This is exactly why the CPA was set up, exactly why. And I don't know why this is a question, because where, if not here, will CPA funds be used? Now, the redevelopment authority and the redevelopment process anticipates, it contemplates that you get what you put into it. Up in North Stoughton, where the redevelopment authority did its only project right now, it spent money, it got money back. The money that's in its fund right now, it has from land sales. Right now, it's leasing out the landfill up to a recycling user and soon to be a solar user. The redevelopment authority, active in this process, has a statutory authority to own that property, to control that property. Mr. Gito just said it, and I think that's the critical thing. I think if this is an important building to this community, and if you look at if you Google Stoughton, it's one of the few things that comes up all the time. I think it's something that you preserve. And it seems to me that the plan to preserve it and the funds that are being used to preserve it, from a fund that was specifically set up to preserve parts of the community, is exactly how you want to do it. I can't tell the body what to do, but I suggest to you that this is a well-thought-out plan and a worthy plan. I'll tell you what I don't like, though. I don't like people identifying the end user, because I think the market has to identify that, and I hate the idea of a restaurant, frankly, because I think restaurants come and go and close down here and there all the time. But what we do want is we want a building that's sound. We want a building that will withstand the weather and doesn't deteriorate, such that we have more damage and we have an unmarketable property, and we have termite problems, we have water problems, we have this and that. Right now, we have to preserve an asset so that we can market it and we can get something back. And I ask that you support it because I think it makes sense. Thank you.
The gentleman, go ahead, yes. Please identify yourself.
Good evening. I'm Michael Barrett from Precinct 4, and I actually have the privilege of serving today on both the Community Preservation Committee with Mr. Morton and the Redevelopment Authority with Forrest and Lou. And there's a lot going on. I think this is a great project. I think, and I really appreciate what Mr. Recupero just added, that the point of view that this is something that will be good for the town, and we're using the funds that are available from our own money, but in a way that it's meant to be used. We've protected the CPA. They will get the money back in the case that we move forward and get this going. But I would just urge you to vote in favor of this project. Thank you.
Mr. Perry. Mr. Soares?
John Perry, Precinct 3. Just want to make a quick point. My office is directly across from Town Hall. I look up every day at the beautiful roof we've put on there, all the nice gutter work, and I'm proud. Not many things in this town I can say I'm proud of. And I think that we do ourselves a misjustice if we don't take the opportunity here to do what's right by the train station. Obviously, we have a positive motion by the selectmen and the redevelopment authority and committee to purchase the building. This is community preservation money. It's the perfect use for it. It's only going to increase the value of the building. Right now, everyone knows market values of property is quite low. That's only going to turn around. We would benefit from it. I could see waiting even a longer term, finding a long-term lease, sitting on the property. I know that people say we don't want to be landlords of this or that. It's foolish not to do this right now, really, folks. It's community preservation money. It's not going to affect us in any way, shape, or form. It's the perfect use for it, and I ask you to support it 100%. Thank you.
Mr. Soros.
Joe Soares, Precinct 2. I just asked the question. There's a roof on the building, and it's made out of slate. It's about 30 years old. So my assumption is you probably get another 70 years for that roof. We had a railroad building committee, and they rebuilt it on the inside. Then the railroad took it back. How do we know the railroad, which is owned by the state, won't take it back? Can anybody here answer that?
Mr. Soares, is a personal privilege. I was very much involved with the restoration back a few years ago in that last century. The T owns the building, and for a period from 1978 to 98, through a series of leases, the town of Stoughton and the Railroad Station Restoration Committee used both private donations and public funds to restore that building at a certain, to the condition it was. But they never, the town has never owned it. It's always been owned by the T, with the exception of one technicality. When the New Haven Railroad went bankrupt, it owed the town of Stoughton taxes, and the town did not take the opportunity. In 1967, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts took all abandoned right-of-ways and put them under the custody of the MBTA. So that's why there has been this long-standing issue, and the lease hasn't been renewed since 1998. So it's still T property. It never left their hands. So I'm just being probably one of the few people still around on that.
Now, pardon me?
Ms. Walsh?
The speaker isn't finished.
Yeah, he isn't finished.
Now, I believe our town, and Mr. Hill can answer this question, is we're $36 million in debt, is that correct?
We have 23 million we're paying down, 27 million we're paying down now, and we also have approximately 13,000 that we've appropriated but not borrowed for.
And what about-
Approximately $40 million total if we borrowed it all.
And what about unpaid liabilities?
That was included,
That
that's
was
the
included.
13 million, yeah.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to go worst-case situation. We buy the building. We own it. And we don't sell it. Who takes care of, or who is responsible for the repairs of that building?
Mr. Gito.
The redevelopment authority, Mr. Gito stated. Now, that means that no money is going to come out of the town?
That is correct. Not unless the town votes to give money to the redevelopment authority for that purpose. Do you want me to say that?
Yes,
In the microphone?
in the microphone.
If the redevelopment authority buys that property, the redevelopment authority owns the property and is responsible for it. It's not the rest of the town that's responsible for that. We hope that we would be able to make a profit on it. We hope that that it will be a wonderful thing for the town. Our mission is to redevelop property. As the previous speaker said, the North Stoughton area is completely redeveloped. Our interest is to work to begin to develop the downtown area. We can purchase this property. We don't take it by any other thing than just a purchase and sale agreement. And so that's what we would do. The rest of the town isn't responsible. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh? Are you finished?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I thought you were.
Will your committee ever run out of money? Will your committee ever run out of money?
At the present time, we have $650,000. That's what we have. And we have the ownership of the portion of the North Stoughton area that's the landfill, and we need to perhaps talk with the town about what's going to happen at the end of this next year when the landfill finally closes and there's a solar farm there. But that's something down the road. So, to answer your question, I don't think that we will run out of money in the short run. In the long run, I can't tell you, but $650,000 will keep us going for quite some time, Mr. Soros.
I'm not sure how long 600,000 will last. In this day and age with the prices there are, it may defer to the town, maybe, to spend money to keep the railroad station going. I'm not sure, but I'm not really for it. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh?
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2. Move the question.
That's to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I will say the motion does carry. Okay. On the motion, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because we do want to get some time done, and that is that the sum of $250,000 is approved by the Community Preservation Committee be used for the purpose of procuring architectural and so on, and that the money be borrowed in terms and so on as printed on this sheet. Since there is a borrowing, I want it recorded. All those in favor, please rise. Precinct 1.
12.
Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 9. Precinct 2, 9. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 14. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 15. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 12. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 11. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 10. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
1.
Precinct 1 is 1. Precinct 2. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 6. Precinct 3. Precinct 3, 0. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 4. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 1. Precinct 8. Okay. It's 92 yes, 12 no. The motion is approved.
And yet we heard
92 yes, 12 no.
12 people.
Article 28B, ID 12. I'm going to yield to the chairman of the town clerk. Is not a privileged, a silly question. Is not a non-voting member of town meeting.
Okay, I move that the sum of $20,000 is appropriated by the Community Preservation Committee be transferred from CPA historical funds for the purpose of conservation, restoration, and repair of the vital record history in the town clerk's office, and further, that the Open Space Committee be designated the restricting authority, if such designation is required by statute or regulation.
This is a transfer.
Just a brief summary of the CPA action on this matter. It came before the CPA initially as a much bigger project. And the CPA came at the request of the town clerk. The committee was very enthusiastic about the idea, but wanted to take it in smaller bites and make sure we began with what were really vital records to restore, to preserve and protect and preserve some of the really important history of this town. This town has some very, very interesting history, from the Suffolk Resolves to a lot of the other things that happened in the past. And so the petitioner is the town clerk, Cheryl Mooney, and I think she should present as to what the substance of the article will include.
Ms. Mooney?
Thank you. On the first night, I gave out a handout and showed some of the records and how they look, and how we're trying to preserve some of these records so we don't lose the actual records. And I will be working with the Historical Commission and picking which books that we will start with so that we don't lose our vital record history from the town.
Ms. Colburn?
Pat Colburn, Precinct 4. I am in favor of this, but the main reason I got up here, at the risk of sounding like the town crier, is I just want to remind everybody that we have 4 meetings left after tonight to complete town meeting and roughly 50 articles. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on 28B? On the motion to cut off debate, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? As this is just a transfer, it requires a majority vote. I'll take a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I'm going to declare it unanimous. (28C), Glen Echo Conservation Land Acquisition. Mr. Morton.
I move that the sum of $38,700 as approved by the Community Preservation Committee be transferred from CPA Open Space, and that the Board of Selectmen be authorized to acquire, under the authority of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, the Community Preservation Act.
Is that 40B or 44?
To acquire for conservation, water quality assurance, and passive recreation purposes for the sum of $32,700 plus closing costs not to exceed $6,000, a parcel of land in Canton, Massachusetts, consisting of 14 acres more or less abutting the 2.8 acres of land in Canton on Glen Echo Lake, currently owned by the Conservation Commission of the town of Stoughton, and including approximately 500 feet of frontage on Glen Echo Lake, as more specifically described in the warrant. The parcel to be acquired shall be held under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission of the town of Stoughton for conservation and passive recreation activities such as hiking and nature walks pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 8C, and further, that the sum of $38,700 be appropriated for such purpose, of which $32,700 shall be applied to land acquisition costs, and up to $6,000 shall be applied against the expenses of the transaction, including expenses such as closing costs and attorney's fees, which funds shall be paid from funds set aside for such purpose in the Town of Stoughton Community Preservation Fund. And to raise such appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, there will be no borrowing in this act, so that piece is not essential to this motion. And further, that the Town of Stoughton Board of Selectmen and/or Conservation Commission be directed to grant one or more perpetual conservation restrictions in said parcel of land, meeting the requirements of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, Section 12, and Mass General Laws, Chapter 184, Sections 31 to 33, and to enter into all agreements and execute any and all instruments as may be necessary on behalf of the Town of Stoughton to effect said purchase. And that the Historical Committee be designated the restricting authority if such designation is required by statute or regulation.
You want to make a quick presentation, shorter than the motion?
Is the motion, may I present on the motion?
Yes.
The committee, I should say at the outset, I am also a member of the Conservation Commission and the Open Space Committee, and we are the actual petitioners in this article. As you know, the Stoughton Community Preservation Committee includes by statute representatives of the Conservation Commission and the Historical Commission and so on. So I am the representative of the Conservation Commission on the Community Preservation Committee. The Community Preservation Committee voted to support this acquisition. There has been some question as to why we would buy a piece of land in Canton. The response to that is this piece of land is much more closely connected to Stoughton than it is to Canton. It is largely a wetlands, but it includes uplands right on the waterfront of Glen Echo Lake. It abuts the property that we already own in Canton on Glen Echo Lake, and you received a handout earlier in the town meeting which showed the description. If a house were built on that piece of land, it would have to have a septic tank because there is no sewer on the Canton side in that area. The largest point source of pollution in Glen Echo Lake are the existing septic systems in the houses that exist along the shore on the Canton side. In addition, the land includes about, I'd say, 13 acres of wetlands, which feed directly into Glen Echo Lake. So it is a very essential piece to protect the water purity of the lake. And it includes a geological structure known as Drum Rock, which goes back in the history of Stoughton for many, many years. That site is connected to existing trail systems in the Stoughton Glen Echo Conservation Preserve with pre-existing trail systems. It's really not very accessible from the Canton side. The property was on the market, and I think in the handout you have the image of the listing for $120,000. There's one other interesting thing to note. The town of Canton owns two properties in the town of Stoughton. I have the assessor's information on those properties. One is 17 acres, and it's assessed at $654,000. The town of Canton pays no taxes to the town of Stoughton on that under a municipal exemption, just as we would pay no taxes to the town of Canton on the land if we were to buy it. The other is on York Street. Both of these are in the vicinity of the power facility by Stop and Shop, and it is assessed at $172,000, and no taxes are paid on it. And it's a large piece of land as well. So it's not unusual for towns to own property in other towns. The essential piece that you should have in mind is that this property is part of what is essential to protect what we already own. And we already own 2.5 acres of 2.8 acres in Canton as part of the property that we bought before. It's essential to preserve the water quality in the area, and it's essential to protect a lot of the historic connection between Drum Rock and the town of Stoughton. There's been some issue with respect to whether we are treating the owner fairly. I would say to you, I was authorized by the Conservation Commission to discuss the purchase of the property with the owner. I met with the owner personally. The owner was represented by an attorney and by a real estate broker. I have a long list of emails between us all, which express the excitement of the owner in moving this thing forward, and the broker. It was the counsel for the owner that drafted the purchase and sale agreement and sent it to our council, and we added some of the municipal provisions that are necessary to add to a purchase and sale when a town purchases. For example, that there has to be an approval of town meeting for the purchase and sale to be effective and things like that. And I've been in constant touch with the broker since they are very anxious to have this be concluded, and I don't think there's any notion that anyone's being treated unfairly here. I would urge that you vote in favor of this. There's not a borrowing. It's $32,700. As you saw in the approval of the CPA budget, we put $64,000 a year at least into the conservation pocket that's set aside for conservation purchases in the town. So it's less than half of a one-year contribution to that fund. It's not going to come out of the general fund, and it will protect and preserve the absolutely magnificent piece of land that we already own. And it is just another piece of land that we will add in Canton, but it's an essential piece, because if there is a house built on that property, and there could well be, it would be served by a septic tank, and that septic tank will leach two ways, one into the lake and two into the wetlands behind the uplands along the lake. Either way, it'll come back into the lake, and I think it's essential that we protect what we already own and move forward with this acquisition. Thank you.
Mr. Linehan.
John Linehan, Precinct 1, also a member of the Community Preservation Committee, representing the Open Space Committee. And I'll be brief. In the interest of moving town meeting along, I'm hoping somebody will come up here behind me and move the question. But this is a great bargain for the...
You can't do that.
This is a great bargain for the town. I think the gentleman who owns it is excited that it's going to be preserved. I personally have history on Drum Rock and off of Drum Rock, and I'm sure that a whole bunch of other people in this room do. But it is already, I don't want to repeat anything that John said, but it's already tied in with our trail system. It is magnificent. This is a great purchase for the future of the town. So I would ask that you heartily endorse it. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy. come to the microphone and don't elaborate.
Move the question.
To cut off debate. On the motion to cut off debate, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Since council and I have a little question about some of the procedures where you acquire land, I'm going to ask that we take a standing count, even though it may only need to be a majority, the fact that we have it on record. So all those in favor, please rise and the chairman take count. Precinct 1.
13.
Precinct 1 is 13. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 16. Precinct 3. 13. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 12. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 12. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 11. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
Nary a one.
0. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 0. Precinct 3. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Now at least I can take attendance, easy way. Precinct 5. 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 1. Precinct 7.
0.
Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 0. It's 100 to 1. I will say the motion is carried no matter what way we have to do it.
What was the total? 100 to 1 or 100 and 1?
100 to 1.
104, 1 against.
100 yes, 1 no. Article 28. You wish to put that on, Mr. Martin, as chairman of the Community
Article
Preservation?
28D. I
28D.
move that the sum of $10,302 as approved by the Community Preservation Committee be transferred from CPA Open Space and Recreation Funds, and $14,698 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated fund balance for architectural services for final design, construction, and bid documents to replace and/or refurbish the CAP Playground on Pierce Street in Stoughton, and further that the Historical Commission be designated the restricting authority if such designation is required by statute or regulation. Very quickly, this is exactly what the Community Preservation Fund is all about. Doing things that improve the quality of life in the town. The CAP Playground is a beautiful thing that is really running, it's getting kind of a rundown, and it needs to be repaired, and it's frequently used, so the Community Preservation Committee was unanimous in supporting this, and Mr. Dennison was the petitioner.
Do not interrupt the speaker to make that motion.
Mr. Dennison was the
Mr. Dennison.
petitioner, and he can speak to the merits of the substance.
Briefly, on page 207 of your booklets, I give a very succinct outline as to why we really need to do this, and I know you can read, and I won't read the whole thing to you, but it is time to replace, it is time to demolish and replace what we know as the Children's Adventure Play Space project, built in 1989 by 200 volunteers. The wooden entire structure can no longer be maintained. There are no companies who can maintain it, and we need to take it down. Besides that, it has become an attraction to young adults, teenagers, for all the wrong reasons, and I have broad support for this program and replacing this playground with something less obtrusive, with better sight lines, the Stoughton Police Department, Oasis under the Youth Commission. under the YMCA Pioneering Healthy Communities, has chipped in a little bit towards our feasibility study, and you all had a copy of that on the first night. Pretty little picture of what we might get. So it really needs to be done. It's been 3 years on my capital improvement plan. It's finally bubbled up here to town meeting. A lot of people support it, including the neighbors. And this just gets us to a point where we can do some final, hard design, construction drawings, and hard cost estimates. And we'll be back next year with Community Preservation's good graces, I hope, with the actual project amount. Thank you for your support.
Mr. Snyder.
I haven't really got up much. Mark Snyder, Precinct 2. I just wanted to speak on this for a moment because one of the great gems in this town that is kind of undiscovered is Halloran Park on Pierce Street. And this is the other part of that equation, the playground next to it. And right now, it is just an absolute horror show. Kids go in there and they come out with splinters, and they get hurt. And the police department can't see in there because of the way the thing's designed. So it's really important that we do this thing over, do it right, and just like Halloran Park, it'll be a gem for the town to have, and I think it's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice. You do not interrupt the speaker to move the previous question, and you do not get up and speak and move the previous question. If you come up and that's the only thing you want to do, come up here to do that.
Just a couple quick questions, John. In the new design, you and a couple other people have related to some of the police problems there with certain things that happen. Will the new design help the police to better protect not only the property, but the kids that use it? Is that somehow going to be in the new design?
Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker, yes, that is fully part of the design, and our intention is to create clearer sight lines, better lighting. Site amenities will be lower so that those who have to patrol the area have clear visibility in. Clearing brush would be a part of that, and may also include some security cameras so that we can literally see some of the difficulties, some of the bad things that go on there. Basically, what we're trying to do here, and a previous speaker just mentioned it, Halloran Park is really a gem. This isn't just replacing the playground, it's kind of an extending that park with a little less playground. And we always believe in town that when we attract good people to these places, people using these places for the right reasons, that some of the bad element goes away. And we hope that culture begins to change there.
Right. John had referenced how the first CAP playground, there was, I forget how many total volunteers, but myself and my Bobcat were also volunteers there, which leads me to the question, John, will we also be looking for some of us to volunteer as we did in the past? Or is this just going to be done by a subcontractor, or are we all going to try to help again?
Mr. Moderator, my initial feeling is that we would contract this out and go with a professional installer. As the concept began to take shape, where we have less playground and more grass, more walkway, other kinds of amenities, more lighting, it seems to me that contractor who can do all those sorts of things and integrate them the way they should be integrated, not just putting a playground into place, would be the way to go. I'm not going to tell you that my mind couldn't be changed if certain elements come together in a certain way, but right now that's how I feel we should go. And I believe liability is lessened to the municipality if a professional contractor installs it.
Thank you, John. And if you do go the other way, as volunteers, a bunch of us did it before, and I'm sure a lot of others, including myself, would be willing to go if you need us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bronston?
Denise Bronston, Precinct 8. You were describing this so that the police would have a straight line of vision, sight. I would like you to make sure that you do that so that we do not need security cameras, which would be monitored by the police in the police station. I think our society is in too much scrutiny. I don't think it's good for the psyche of the people that will be using this, knowing that the police are constantly watching them. But if you do design this, as you had stated earlier, so that the police are driving by, they can see right in, you wouldn't need security cameras.
Mr. Coleman?
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. I move the question.
This is cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. As this is a transfer, all I need is a simple majority vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I will even declare it unanimous. Motion carries. Article 28E.
I move that the sum of $20,000 is approved by the Community Preservation Committee be transferred from CPA historical funds to create and place 20 high-quality historical signs at various locations in the town, and further that the Open Space Committee be designated the restricting authority if such designation is required by statute or regulation. This came before the CPA, it was, the CPC, it was unanimously approved. The idea, it was supported by the Historical Commission. The chairman of the Historical Commission was going to be here tonight but couldn't make it. He was going to speak in favor of it. These are to be permanent, high-quality signs that will go on several of, or 20 very selected, mostly public buildings in town. It's all part of beginning to remind people about the history of this place that we live in, and we were definitely in favor of supporting this. The funds will come from the historical funds, which and there's no borrowing required.
Mr. Linehan.
I would just say this particular item, just like the others, are really doing what the CPA was created for, and enhancing our town in this case, and making it a better place to live, an educational resource for our kids. That's one of the things we talked about at some length, how so many of the kids now don't know the history of our town, and putting out signage like this on some of the great treasures we have. I wonder how many of us even know some of these great treasures beyond the Historical Commission. So again, I ask you to support this. I think it's money very well spent, not only for its direct purpose, but for the indirect purpose of just enhancing our town overall. Thank you.
Mr. Paul Smith.
Paul Smith, Precinct 7. Move the question.
That's the cutoff debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion is carried. On the motion, as this is simply a transfer, it'll be a majority vote. I'll take a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. Now declare it unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Article 29. I'm going to, who's in charge of this? But allow the town manager, since he's in charge of everything for the selectmen,
It's not their motion, though.
to put on the Article 29, which is to
Mr. Moderator, it's not their motion.
Okay. Move that the town vote to appropriate $235,000 for the purchase of property located at 75 Lambert Street, and to meet this appropriation, $1,617.60 be transferred from Article 1 of the special town meeting of May 2004 from Department 3627. That $1,020.06 be transferred from Article 2 of the special town meeting of May 2004, Department 3630. $2,790.82 be transferred from Article 25 of the annual town meeting of May 2005, Department 3648. That $11,124.95 be transferred from Article 34 of the annual town meeting of May 2006, Department 3678. That the sum of $225 be transferred from Article 3 of the special town meeting of March 2007. That would be Department 3687. That the sum of $345.48 be transferred from Article 4 of the special town meeting of May 2008 from Department 3694. That 24 cents be transferred from Article 37 of the annual town meeting of May 2008, Department 3703. That $21,115.70 be transferred from Article 3 of the special town meeting of May 2001, Department 6890. That $25,656.75 be transferred from Article 65 of the annual town meeting of May 2006, Department 6898. That $5,967.55 be transferred from Article 46 of the annual town meeting of May 2006. $277.64 be transferred from Article 68 of the annual town meeting of May 2006, that being Department 5887. That $15,000 be transferred from Article 6 of the annual town meeting of May 2006, Department 8293. That $34,962.91 be transferred from Article 43 of the annual town meeting of April 1978, and that would be Department 6513, and that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $114,895.29 under Mass General Law 44, Section 7, parentheses 3, or any other enabling authority. And I thank Rick for that long motion.
Mr. Hill on the background from the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee, in conjunction with the town accountant, we're looking again at sources of funding for all of these articles. One of the sources of funding was the residual amounts of money that had been borrowed for projects, but this was the amount of money left over. So we wanted to use up as much of that money as we could. This is a great application of the use of that money. It's about $120,000 in unexpended articles that's going towards this project. So it makes a lot of sense, and we highly endorse it.
I believe I have a representative from the property owners, of Mr. John Tierney. Is he present? Oh, well, if he's not present, he ain't going to speak. Mr. Tierney, please come forward, identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Questions?
Well, identify yourself. I know.
Thank you. I'm John Giannino. I'm the counsel for the three estates in the trust that own the property at 75 Lambert Ave. The property's been for sale for many years. I know it's been an eyesore to the community, and the title holders would love to sell it. We've had several opportunities in terms of offers, but at each turn, they've been turned down for whatever reason. And so at this point, the town has interest, and we're certainly interested in selling to the town.
Mr. DeFelice, you have any questions to either the property owner's representative or to the meeting?
I guess I have a question for the town. What's the cost going to be to demo the building?
Mr. Hartman.
The condition of the sale is that the existing owner will demo the building.
You're going to demo the building?
Why question that?
Thank you.
Town manager said that that's the case.
He hasn't looked at that.
I think that the terms of the sale haven't been completely done as yet, but our understanding was that the building would be demolition by the town.
By the town?
Yes. Okay.
Could be interesting.
Well, again, the offer,
I said what the town manager said.
That's why I asked the
Wasting
question.
Mr. Hartman.
Here we go.
Actually, the letter we sent indicated that the price we agreed to included you demoing the building, not the town.
okay, that would be acceptable to the sellers.
What do you say, Mr. DeFelice?
Ask the question, you get an answer.
You got an answer.
Further, Mr.
The other
DeFelice.
question I had was, is there a 21E issue on that property? Basically, because it was a garage for many, many, many years, possibility of oil on the property.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, the town is in possession of the environmental study, and there are no restrictions on the long-term intended use of the property, which would be primarily as parking for the Council on Aging and Youth Commission.
And what is the real estate tax loss when the town takes this property over? In other words, when if we require the property, there's no longer tax revenue coming from that property. So I guess what I'm asking is, what's the revenue loss in taxes for the town?
Not being able to do the math directly in my head, I can tell you the assessed value is $171,000. So it would be the tax rate times 171.
Okay. And when, I'm not sure of this, but I think when there was another party that was going to develop it, wasn't there an issue of a zone line or zoning of that property? To the selectman nodding his head? Wasn't him.
I believe the only development that came before the selectmen on that was for a Chapter 40B development, which, as we all know, it wouldn't matter how it was zoned. I believe this is just under 3 acres, this particular parcel, or do you know if it was 3 or just under 2? I'm sorry, just under 2. I'm not aware of any issues that came up as far as zoning for any project. As I say, the only project that came before the Board of Selectmen was when they came in to look at a Chapter 40B. You know, what we're looking at, the Board of Selectmen has been interested in this property for a while because it does abut a piece of property the town already owns, where we've already combined the Youth Commission and the Council on Aging. You can't make more land. This is a perfect piece of property where if we want to either expand the Council on Aging or put up a separate area for the Youth Commission down the line, it just gives the town so much opportunity to take the opportunity to buy a piece of property and be prepared down the line. We'd be able to move forward with something we already have for the seniors, for the youngsters. There was a lot of questions about that when it went together. This may be a way to expand and give everybody even more room to do what they want to do down there. And just to address one of the past points made by the previous speaker, I would suggest that the amount of taxes that we may lose from the town owning this property, when we get rid of the eyesore and dress it up a bit, I suggest that the surrounding properties may actually increase a little bit because they won't have this eyesore there. My own opinion, but that's the way I look at it.
Mr. Moderator, through you to Selectman O'Regan, I think you had nodded your head when I asked about the zoning issue. Could you tell us what that was?
I may have fallen asleep.
Got the jitters.
To the previous speaker, by recollection only, there is an issue on those two parcels where they're different zoning districts. I can't recall if it's an industrial or commercial, but it's not all one district. It's dominated by one district, and I don't know the proportions, but it's more than one zoning district is my recollection on those properties.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And the reason I brought that up was I don't know whether that would affect any future use. When you have zoning lines, it's a little tricky trying to develop across zoning lines. So, thank you.
I believe that
It was pre-zoning, so it doesn't have the zoning problems. If they wanted to continue on with the trucking or whatever was there, they can, because it's pre-existing non-conforming.
There's an issue with abandoned use, but... Yeah.
it's also is my recollection, and having known that property for many years, it is general business.
Go ahead, if you want to do that one.
Is that correct, Mr.
To the
Corral?
previous speaker, the issue is whether or not that use, the prior non-conforming use, had been abandoned.
Has not been abandoned, there's been a truck driver parking there right up till now, still.
Mr. Carrara, please rise.
Well, we don't have to debate whether it would or wouldn't be an abandoned use because the building's coming down. E-I-E-I-O. Thank you.
Just to address a point, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker, as a municipality, the zoning would not apply to us.
Mr. Murphy.
Peter Murphy, Municipal Operations Committee. We had a vote of 3-2 on this. We were kind of split between it, and there wasn't anything definitive to say yes, nothing to say no. Again, they don't make any more land. This piece of land is probably in a very good spot for the town's use. The reason the vote, no vote, as far as my part was the fact that when do we stop buying property? We keep buying property, buying property, buying property. And this is more of a statement to say, okay, enough is enough. But I mean, realistically, this parcel of land is never going to come back up again for the town. It actually is probably a good opportunity. The other point I want to make, and I kind of go back to the issue of the sunset being put on all these articles, the money we keep borrowing. Here we have $120,000 that's sitting out there on borrowed money that we're paying interest, again, for all these other articles. We really have to look at that and do something about that. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh. Raise your hand.
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2, move the question.
I believe that's inappropriate. We have two other people here that have come down. So
Make the vote.
if I'm doing this as a point of order, and where there are speakers present, I'll remind you that. She did ask for the motion in the proper form, and if you think these two speakers should be given that time, do not vote to move the previous question. All those in favor of moving the previous question, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'm going to declare it not carried. Mr. Lyons. Who? That gentleman up back. If you keep shouting out in that manner, I'll have you removed. Continue, Mr. Lyons. At this time, I made that decision. There are people here that asked, you were given opportunities, they should be given opportunities, and one of these is in a butter to that problem. There will be no point of information. I have recognized Mr. Lyons. Mr. Cohen, please sit down.
7 people, stand up.
The moderator is the last word and rule, and you understand that. I declared that the motion did not carry, and that is it. Mr. Lyons.
This is taking longer than I'm going to speak. I'm Frank Lyons, I'm Precinct 8, I live in that neighborhood. all right? That building is an eyesore, it is a hazard, all right? The money you will save with the police not going down there all the time and the fire department worrying about it, all right? If we don't vote for this, something really bad's gonna happen there, all right? It will. If you lived in the neighborhood, you would be aware of it. We've been lucky. I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. I don't have an objection to the article. I do have a procedural question, and perhaps through you to Town Council. It's my recollection that in the past, well, let me ask first as a question. Did I hear stated, do we have a signed purchase and sales agreement for this property or no?
That's right.
Can the
I'm sorry?
town manager respond to that?
There is a letter of agreement.
A letter of agreement?
Correct.
Did I, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker, did I hear you mention previously that there are still details to this purchase that are being negotiated?
No, that is not correct. The letter of agreement issues a price. The price is predicated on the owner tearing the building down. I was very clear about that.
Okay. And is the price the $235,000 listed in the article?
No, it is not.
Okay. So that leads me to my, I guess, question to Town Council, that in the past, if memory serves me, whenever we've had an article to purchase property, the town had entered into a purchase and sale agreement such that it was contingent upon a vote of this body of town meeting. So through you, Mr. Moderator, Town Council, is it still the case that for this town to approve a purchase, does it need to be an executed purchase and sales agreement or some memorandum of agreement in effect in order for this body to approve the purchase?
Mr. Riley.
Through Mr. Moderator, to the Speaker, in my opinion, that's not a requirement. This body simply, if it appropriates the money, that's as much money as available. Sorry. But there does not need to be an executed purchase and sale or other written finality agreement for it.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Riley. And Mr. Moderator, just since we're being so technical on our language tonight, is not the address of the property Lambert Avenue and not Lambert Street? I just don't want that to become an issue with the vote. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, now we'll take that motion. Motion is made to cut off debate. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, this time. This is a borrowing, and it is also the purchase or sale of land. It requires a counted vote. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take count. Precinct 1.
10.
Precinct 1 is 10. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 20. 14. Precinct 3. 10. Precinct 3 is 10. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 10. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 9. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 9. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 7. All those opposed, please rise and chairman take count. Precinct 1.
1.
Precinct 1 is 1. Precinct 2. 1. Precinct 2 is 1. Precinct 3. 0. Precinct 3 is 0. Precinct 4. 1. Precinct 4 is 1. Precinct 5. 0. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 0. Precinct 6 is 0. Precinct 7. 0. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. 0. Precinct 8 is 0. The motion carries 83 yes, 3 no. We are now ready to move on to
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Murphy.
point of interest, end of the second period, Blackhawks nothing, Bruins 2.
Is that a commercial message? What's that? Oh. Article 30. Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 57C, to provide for quarterly billing for real estate and personal property tax payments in the town effective July 1st, 2014.
We have somebody from the Board of Assessors. Please identify.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Louis Jutras, 319 West Street, Chairman of the Board of Assessors. Just wanted to be brief. 78% of the communities in Massachusetts have a quarterly tax payment system. I've been on the board for a couple of years. In those times, we've always received complaints about bills going out and being paid around Christmas. This basically would guarantee 4 specific dates throughout the year: August, November, February, and May. Gives the town a better cash flow. Basically, we've gone back and forth. This has been recommended by a financial review from the state. It has gone ahead and been approved by the Finance Committee, the Municipal Operations Committee, and the Municipal Regulations Committee. And so we ask for your support.
Are there any further questions? Oh, Mr. Rock. Right?
John Rock, Precinct 3. I promised my neighbor across the street I would express her voice against this, so that's what I'm doing.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. We saw this motion before, and Tom Rory, our treasurer at the time, says it wasn't worth it for us. There'd be, I believe, more expenses for doing the billing than there would be savings in interest if we borrowed. So, and I think it's more of an inconvenience to have to pay bills 4 times a year, but that's me.
Is our town treasurer, Mrs. Erickson?
I'm not opposed to this. In fact, as I mentioned, DOR recommended this 10 years ago to be done. It will be an added burden to the office. There will be an additional cost to the office, but I don't believe it will be that much of a burden for us for the convenience of the taxpayers, for the cash flow that we'll experience. And I actually think it's a good move for the town to move forward this way.
Any further discussion? If not, did I hear some? On the motion to move the previous question, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Motion carries. On the vote, as I understand, this only requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. There's doubt in the mind of the chair. All those in favor, please rise. Precinct 1.
5.
5. 5. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 10. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 7. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5.
5.
Precinct 5 is 5. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 5. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 4. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 7. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
4.
Precinct 1 is 4. Precinct 2? 6. Precinct 2 is 6. Precinct 3? 2. Precinct 3 is 2. Precinct 4? 1. Precinct 4 is 1. Precinct 5?
3, and we
Precinct-
have an additional one in favor.
6 and 3?
6.
Precinct 6? 1 and 1. Precinct 7? Precinct 7 is 6. Precinct 8? 0. Precinct 8 is 0. 58 yes, 23 no,
And one abstention.
abstention. The motion carries. 58 yes, 23 no. Are these microphones set down a little lower? I'm having trouble with you. All right. Mr. Murphy. There's 81, our quorum is 78, so we're still here. Well, the quorum exists until you... Article 31, Mr. Hill.
I'm not sure that we have a motion on this one, Mr. Moderator, unless the,
All right, there's a good point.
we might want to table it.
Mr. Moderator, we're looking to dismiss this article.
Well, that's the better way. And the motion is to dismiss. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is dismissed.
Thank you.
That's the quickest we can do that. Article 32.
That the town vote to approve an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes, parenthesis, pilot, and parenthesis, pursuant to the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 37H(b), and Chapter 164, Section 1, or any other enabling authority for a certain sum and a certain term of years between the town and the property owner for real property and personal property relating to a renewable energy generation facility on the land located at 139 Sherman Ave, Providence Road, as shown on the Assessor's Map 088 as parcel 143. Schuman Ave, sorry.
Is there any discussion from the... Chapter 59, Section 38HB.
What? In the book, I printed one off the internet, but I don't know if there is one in here. The article reference in the appendix will have a table of contents as the kind of cover, the plastic tab. I don't see one. Right. But I do have a map in case anybody wants it in the listing.
Are you all set? I'm going to tax assessor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Louis Jutras, Chairman of the Board of Assessors. Just as a brief background, we were approached by a developer that wanted to put in a solar array on top of a building. There were the two articles, one for the power purchase. Timing did not work out on that one, but we are still looking for approval to have the Board of Selectmen enter into agreement with this company to go ahead and have a pilot payment in lieu of taxes. This is an area where the value is about $24,000 for a 20-year period. The contract and terms have been drawn up, submitted through both attorneys and were given to the Board of Selectmen probably almost a month ago. End result for us, the guaranteed revenue. The reason for this approach instead of straight tax calculation is due to the fact that the state in the last couple of years has had the potential of coming with legislation to change whether the solar would be taxable or not. And this would basically guarantee the amount for us. They are going to invest in some upgrades for the utility as well as the building itself, and therefore we'll also have new growth for tax valuation purposes.
Mr. Hanson?
Through the moderator to the previous speaker. Is this to, so the solar array facility is not part of the property tax for that facility? Or is it, give me a little bit more information. For instance, is it just a tax abatement in essence, or is it dependent on the generation of electricity? Tell me a little bit.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the prior speaker, this program will not affect the taxes that the individual property and the building itself pays. This is just for the solar array itself. The solar array has a value that could be $2, $3, $4 million. That's the install cost. That is not the actual cost that it could be taxed upon, and therefore this number of $24,000 on a yearly basis would be in lieu of the personal property tax only for that one section on the roof for that new company.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
The new taxes on this
Come
installation.
closer to the microphone.
The installation, you just mentioned it's going to be $2, $3, or $4 million?
Yeah, that's what we have as an estimate from them, correct?
All right, so this would be taxed as a personal property at this point. So they're asking to do it as a pilot program so they don't have to pay those personal property taxes, correct?
Correct.
Because it wouldn't be financially feasible to do this if they had to pay taxes on what they were doing.
Again, in the calculation that we went through, you're looking at something that has, in a commercial aspect, there are different ways of calculating it based on the income is one approach. And if you went through what would be sold, usable, time of day, area of town, take all that into consideration, there wasn't a large difference in one number versus the other. This does give a benefit and gives them a solid number to use for their financing and going through the project on their end. So we're not in an area where we have significant loss, but we are giving them a guaranteed number.
No, you didn't give me any figures. What would the figures be? You've done two calculations. What are the figures that without, on the personal property, how it would be what would be the cost of that taxes as opposed to the $24,000 you're talking?
On the quick calculation we did, we were in the $26,000 to $27,000 range.
So only $2,000 or $3,000 difference?
That's about it.
Per year or per quarter?
Per year.
Per year.
That's a one-year number.
And we're not going to be purchasing any electricity. That's been...
Correct, yeah, that, with the timing of town meeting and everything else, the utility and National Grid was pushing for commitments, and this just didn't fit in.
Okay. So they won't be able to do this unless we give them a break, is what it amounts to.
It's one part of a multifaceted. They have the individual with the utility, they have the individual with the property owner, they have the individual with the town, and then they actually have trying to sell the energy itself. So it's multifaceted.
So at this point, it's not even sure that's going to happen?
They have submitted all the required paperwork. This is the last piece. All the other factors have been resolved. And as I stated, there is an agreement that has gone back and forth between all councils. So if town meetings approved it, they are going forward with the project.
Numbers just don't seem to add up from what I can see. You know, the numbers that you're saying, is a $4 million personal property, is what it would be taxed at because it's not real estate, is only $26,000 a year?
Well, the $4 million is your potential construction cost. That's not actual value. We're right now around a $25, $26 tax rate. So on that one, $4 million to physically install, which has labor and so on, actual cost of the panels, 2.5.
Okay.
So 2 times 25 is, and that's what you're going off.
2 times 25 is 50.
Correct.
Right.
That could be your most after, and again, then you have depreciation on that year after year after year. So this is a 20-year guarantee amount, and once it's up there, you're not going to have improvements because they're using the entire square footage. So you'd have, in the total term, you'd go from the potential high of that 50, and 10, 15 years down, you'd be only at 5, 6, 7,000 potentials.
Okay, numbers don't add up. Thank you.
Mrs. Carrera.
Stephanie Carrara, Precinct 2. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the building inspector, I have a couple questions. Sorry.
Mr. McGrath.
What this, Ms. McGrath, what this article is asking, is this an accessory use, or is this an additional use on that property? And is that triggering zoning? Is it permitted by right? Does it need a special permit?
This would be permitted by right, and it wouldn't be, a building permit would have to be applied for, and it would be granted because photovoltaic and solar energy gathering is pretty much exempt from zoning, but it would be an alteration to the building. IKEA did it fairly recently. I didn't realize that there were tax consequences like this in the project, but there are several buildings in town that have applied for building permits to add photovoltaic arrays on their roof, and we analyze it. We make sure that the buildings will carry the structural loads and whatnot, and that the electrical work is done to code, and it's inspected by my department and the fire department, and it's signed off.
Okay, and just so I can write this down, it will not be considered two principal uses on the lot?
No, it won't.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. Question I have on this article is a case of where, as a previous speaker mentioned, IKEA has solar panels. All right, now would they be allowed to come back and ask the same question? Will we have to extend the tax break to them? Are we starting to set a precedent for any other business that would want to put solar panels? And now you also get into the question, are there federal grants for these companies to put solar panels on?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, for your specific question with regard to IKEA, the town had given them a TIF, and in TIF agreements, personal property basically is taken care of. So they can do things in that regard, and there's no addition. To go to second piece of the question, if you had solar panels put on other properties, it's going to go back to the type of use. If they're taking it, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but remembering all the pieces on it, if they're taking it and using it within the structure itself, then no. If they're taking it and putting it into the grid, then yes, there could be tax implications.
So you're saying that if my own personal property, I put solar panels on the roof, that's going to increase the value of my house. I'm going to have to pay a tax on those panels because it just increased the value of my house.
It's used for your residence, that'd be different. There are some there are some restrictions or exemptions or options for residential versus commercial versus self-contained use of the property versus feeding into the grid.
Okay, now the last question is, are we setting a precedence for all other businesses coming in that want to put solar panels on? If we give one a tax break, well, we're going to have to give everybody else a tax break.
Again, it goes back to the base piece. This organization that has come in is putting an array on top of a property. They are feeding that into the grid, and it is being supplied to the entire, anyone who can buy it. If a organization put it on top of their own structure, that is different than what we are talking about now.
So this business doesn't own that piece of property. They're basically leasing the space above to put the grid on top.
Correct.
So they could do that to every building down there and do the same thing.
That is a potential.
Thank you.
Mr. Soares? Mr. Billow?
Hi, I'm David Billow, Precinct 4. I'm also the chair of the town's Energy and Sustainability Committee, and the committee hasn't been involved in this issue directly, or really at all, but it seems to me what the assessors have done or are doing is negotiated a good deal in an emerging tax climate, good deal for the town, what's going to probably be a reasonable deal for the developers. And it's actually true that the state has already passed a law in 2008 that any solar panels on the roof of a residence are not taxable. That's just clearly stated. And that certainly is possible that could change in the future for commercial as well. So I think with everything that's been going on in the world, we all know that the climate is changing. Pretty easy for us to just say, assessors have done a good job, they've negotiated a good deal for the town. It's more taxes coming in. It's not a abatement or anything like that. And I think we should support it and support solar in general. Thank you.
Mr. Mullen?
Bob Mullen, Precinct 2. Just a couple of quick questions. I read this number of times, and I'm still a little confused about the whole issue. I read the stuff in the back to make it, without prolonging the whole thing. Number one, the article doesn't really reference solar, right? I read the law in the back, and it's any type of renewable energy in that list. This going to be just pertaining to solar? Why didn't you put that in the article, number one? And number two, on the other hand, I know solar's a great, well, we don't know if it's really perfect here, but solar may or may not be the way to go, depending upon what other renewable energy sources come about. But I think also the town is looking for ways to increase their tax revenue. I'm just thinking, on the other hand, shouldn't we kind of hold off on this and maybe, weighing, could we bring in more taxes by increasing these solar panels down the line, down the road? I don't know. I mean, are we kind of limiting ourselves?
Through you, Mr. Moderator. As far as the wording, that was done originally and through town council, specific for that range. This project is specific to the property, and it is specific for solar. That's what the agreement is on that end. As far as value is concerned, we've had some general discussion going back and forth. The different types of properties, the different things that the state has done already, has tried to do, and may do in the future. This is a definitive number for a contracted number of years, and in the very end, we feel that the value outweighs what the tax would have been because you're calculating on what their sale is and/or taking the actual equipment with depreciation over the period of time.
What is the number of years that you're contracting for?
This is a 20-year agreement.
20 years.
24 every year.
I'm going to vote against this one. I think we should just hold off and wait. We can always bring it up again next year as things go on. But we're always looking for tax revenue, and I think we should really think about this. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Soros, do you still want to speak?
Yes, sir.
Go to it.
Joe Soers, Precinct 2. God, I know I'm not the brightest bulb in the world, but I'm still confused. Is this some type of a tax that you're going to initiate with this person who wants to put these solar panels on another roof? Or is this some type of an agreement with the town that the town is going to make him less taxes so we can pay for this? That's where I'm confused.
The pilot program is payment in lieu of taxes. This is something that can go through a variety of different methods. It's basically signed off on by the Board of Selectmen, and in this case, vetted through town meeting. What we are doing is, that agreement specifies the term and the dollar amount, and that covers any and all taxes that would have been paid for the property. So along the lines of the TIF agreement, where we've specified a length and term, we've specified either a value as a starting point and an increment for every one of those years. And we know that is the life of it.
Okay, this is the only thing I have to add for solar panels. People think that when you put solar panels on the roof, that there's no maintenance to them. You just leave them alone. That's not true. The dust that they collect at nighttime, if you want them to be 100% efficient, you have to go up to the roof the next day and wipe them off. And if you don't wipe them off, I'm sorry.
We do not own them. The amount that we receive on a yearly basis is not based on generation. That was, in essence, a separate article. So this is $24,000, 20 years. That is the amount that we will receive.
No, I understand all of that. I'm not sure what these people are talking about, but I don't think they didn't let me finish. Basically, if those solar panels are not that efficient, and yes, it costs the person who puts them up on the roof, somebody has to go up there and wipe them down, then they're not going to make as much money as they thought they were going to make. And here we are with the town needs revenue, and I think the town is taking revenue from the wrong place. I remember somebody came up here and says, hey, I know where to get free money. And free money was to tax the restaurants in Stoughton. Well, who pays for the restaurants in Stoughton? Me. I don't think this is good for the town, and I will definitely not pay for it. Thank you. I will definitely not vote for it. Thank you.
I see no more persons wishing to speak on this. So I have heard the call to move the previous question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. We're just voting, whatever it is here, that the town vote to approve an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes pursuant to provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, and all the related sections, and Chapter 164, and all these other enabling authorities for a certain sum and a certain term of years between the town and the property owner for real property and personal property relating to a renewable energy generation facility on land located at 139 Schuman Avenue, Providence Road, and shown on Assessors Map 88 as Parcel 143. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Just so there's no doubt in my hearing, all those in favor, please rise, and Chairman, take the count. Precinct 1.
6.
Precinct 1 is 6. Precinct 2. 9. Precinct 2 is 9. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 10. Precinct 4. 16. 15. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 9. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 6. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 7. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 6. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
3.
Precinct 1 is 3. Precinct 2. 6. Precinct 2 is 6. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. 0. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. 0. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 1. Precinct 6 is 1. Precinct 7. 2. Precinct 7 is 2. Precinct 8. 1. Precinct 8 is 1. 68 yes, 14 no. It is approved. It is now 10:40. Mrs. Carrara.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn tonight's Wednesday, June 19th at 7:15 sharp.
Now, I got one question. How do we notify those people who aren't here that we're coming back? I know it. Thank you. And you got the attendance.
Yeah, exactly.